Hello and welcome back to Jarl's Favour devlog. It has been a good few months, I think. Work did slow down on this game for a while, but I'm back into it. So let's start off almost from scratch because I've forgotten what I've got up to in the devlogs. I'll be quick though. So here we are looking at our landscape, which I designed in Gaia, a separate landscape program, imported that into Unreal, carved a bit of extra landscaping like these fjords over here, carved them in using the landscape painting tool. Then I designed this auto material, which has these differing materials depending on height. Basically, so we have snow, then we have this grass, forest mulch, and underneath we have this mud material. I will be putting procedural foliage on these materials, so this mud will have patches of seaweed and rock, which will be foliage, meaning no collision mesh. There will be some foliage for snow, which will just be little rocks. At the moment, the snow has the foliage, grass foliage from this texture material here. I'll remove that and replace it with snow-covered rocks and snow mounds, not too much. The mounds will have to be hand-painted foliage, as they can't be, as I need a collision mesh on them. As you see here, there's no grass foliage because I've painted it out just to see what it looks like. I think it looks pretty good. These will be fast travel points in the game. Right, so that's back up to speed on the landscape and the landscape design, and then what I've done is I've begun building layers, data layers. Here, where'd we go? Never mind, I hit it somewhere. Anyway, I've begun building data layers so I can load in and out. So if you're, for example, visiting the main village here, pretty much the rest of the world will unload or just have some very basic LOD imposters floating around outside the village, and the village can be much more detailed, and I'm really making sure I organize the world well for optimization, load times, and if you're out in basically this area here, so there's basically quadrant 1, most of this will be loaded. Over here won't. Again, it'll be basic LOD, billboards or imposters and so on. Down here probably be its own section loading. It all depends on line of sight. So if you're down on the ground here, you're not going to see much, so I can unload a lot of things. So I'm designing data layers in that regard. Okay, let's move on to water. You can see I've got an ocean. That's just a basic simple plane as a placeholder. There's no smarts here and no caustics or underwater shader. But what I do want to talk about is the water here. So you can see it running through the landscape. Got a little lake here. All of these rocks have been hand placed, including all of the rocks along the river here. And all of this. I'm beginning with hand placement, and that will guide procedural placement. So the forests and most of this area here below the snow will be all forest, will be procedurally generated, except for points of interest. So here I want this to be on its hand and make it a little bit interesting by having these dead trees, bit of dieback area for whatever reason. Touching on the materials one last time, we can see here there's a divide. This will be tundra area. It'll be tundra grass and rock, no trees or very sparsely populated trees. This area will be forest. Okay, now on to water. So I experimented with water a bit. I began with the traditional spline-based river here. Doesn't look too bad. And I ran this spline all the way down this fjord slash river coming from the mountain. It's quite long, it's pretty huge actually. And carry on. There's multiple splines happening here because I also, not only the water, I'll slow my camera down. It's not only the water at the top level, but underneath we can see I have a ground level, some rocks. That just made the spline task easier. If the player jumped in, they weren't going to get stuck on rocks underneath. I wasn't sure at the time when I put this if I was going to have swimming or not. It looks okay. Bit old school. Could have kept on working on it, but I found it to be too laborious and not realistic enough. Spline rivers I think are good for the traditional in-game rivers which run flat, like a horizontal plane and then a bit of a cascading waterfall and another horizontal plane. You'll find that is the most common kind of river in video games, but I'm not really happy with that in this design, if I can get away with it, and I think I can. So I designed this river, put this huge spline in. It's functional, but it's not going to be used. Or I might keep it as a distant LOD. Then what I have settled on is fluid flux, and I really like fluid flux. It is doing what I want. So let's move in and have a look. So comparing the two rivers, this one looks much more realistic and dynamic and has a lot more variance. This is simulated water. So this cage here, this grid mesh, is the simulation boundary for fluid flux. I have multiple because you can't get too big, it'll just bomb out. So I have side by side, which I'll show you in a minute. And within this simulation boundary I have these basically water dispensers. So coming out of here, on the other side will be a river. So what we'll do is, while I talk and explain fluid flux and how the water is going to look and affect the level design, I'll essentially get the other simulation started. So I'll start a simulation here, and you can see water is starting to fill in the simulation area. It'll take a little while to fill up. I probably could speed that up, but I'm not too concerned. I'd rather it be nice and accurate. It gets a bit funky here to begin with, but it calms down. I think that's the steep slopes causing this erratic behavior. Okay, so fluid flux, I place within the simulation boundaries, I place these, we'll call them water dispensers, and as you can see, they start putting water out, and they simulate what's going to happen based on velocity and what they're colliding with and the depth of the water. It's all white water at the moment. Here at the end of this little section I have this box here. Is hard to see. There it is. This absorbs the water that's coming here. So what's going to happen is this lake will fill up. It runs down here, fills up this part of the river, and the player will think the water's going underneath the rock and coming out the other side. But what's really happening is I have two simulations occurring, or two boundaries of simulations. So one simulation ends here, all the water gets absorbed and basically removed from the simulation inside this bound or this box. And on the other side, a new simulation begins and water is pumped out here. And it looks great. So I've got these cascades coming down. Slow the camera down so I get a better look. It does hurt my CPU/GPU a bit, and eventually the simulation will chew up all my video memory, but that's why I turn each one off. And the end product, I will bake the simulation. I'll turn these into a mesh so the simulation doesn't have to work. Right, we have waterfalls coming down here. Comes into this, my current spline, but this of course will be turned into a fluid flux river. And just down here it'll meet with the ocean, which it's doing at the moment. And the ocean will be fluid flux as well. And the simulated nature of fluid flux has really helped me with world design as well. I already obviously had carved rivers and streams into the world, but then the occasional breakout has led me to make these extra little flows, which just looks better, much more realistic, more dynamic, and I'm quite happy with it. I haven't put any Niagara particle effects on yet, but there will be splashes that'll sort of tie this in with the environment a lot more. It does have an underwater shader, as we can see, so that's great. It has buoyancy and swimming components, which I'll be using. I'll probably recolor the water a little bit just to brown it up, dirty it up a little bit and make it slightly less transparent, but that is dynamic as well, so I can have some areas, just say at the head of a waterfall, be nice and clear, and toward the end or in stagnant lakes I can make those more brown and dirty. Coming up here I have another water dispenser which I have made to look like a spring, a natural spring, so I just carved a deep hole in the landscape and the water essentially bubbles up right here and feeds this lake coming down these waterfalls. Again, all simulated as you saw. I just click start simulation and away it goes. Can be a little bit fiddly, you need to figure a few things out, but it's not. But it's, yeah, it eventually will be a lot less work than using the previous blind-based method. And then I just gently feed it into, by the way of my slopes that I carve or blocking rocks, I can create streams that run all the way to the ocean. I've put in some foliage rocks to populate the sides of streams. I've got some material that I'll paint everywhere eventually. And as I was saying, these fluid flux and the simulated nature of it has really helped me design how these rivers are going to look, where I put rocks, the speed, matching it with real world rivers, which thankfully where I live there are quite a few of, and that look very similar to this actually. Even though I'm in Australia, some parts of Australia are alpine. And down we come, and then it'll flow into the ocean, which I will make fluid flux. So this is all coming off the one simulated box. I have that stream, I have this stream which is a more shallow stream, therefore I've painted it a bit different as though the mud is being constantly washed away. And I have these specular rocks to give them those wet look underneath these. So if there's any bridge going over the simulation, I need to give it a tag of flux hide, which I have given hundreds of objects that tag. What that does is the simulation is projected from, so the way I'm looking at it now, it beams a projection down over the landscape and builds a height map. If there's anything blocking the height map, it'll mess with the simulation, so I need to tell the height map to ignore this particular asset. So under we go, stream keeps on flowing down underneath the bridge, which I've also given the tag of flux hide, so the water can go underneath it, and it too reaches the ocean. I'm really happy with this method. I think it looks good. I like the way it flows, and it really does help me design the landscape with that much more detail, to be a bit more natural as well. And you get some pretty good looking water, I reckon, especially once I populate it with actual foliage and put the procedural forests in and so on, and some varying weather. It'll look great. Down the bottom here I've got another one of these water absorbers. Basically at the end of any river run I want the water to be removed, otherwise eventually this entire box would fill up with water. It'll just keep going up and up and up to the top like a bath. That's why I will remove water. And then back onto this side, I could remove these rocks and have the spring spill out over here. I'll keep them in, just a bit of landscape design, but I put another water dispenser here to fill up over on this side of the map. A couple of nice little ponds, another water absorber, which might be causing a hard cut off there, but that's okay. These are things I will address. Attention to detail is one of my strong points. We carry on down these little streams, and here's I've manually populated this area to just give a feel of what the end product I'm going for will be. There'll be obviously more foliage cover, trees all around, and more foliage on the edges of the stream here, but we have a few human objects. But again, I think it looks good, and the fact that it just, once you set it up properly and you figure out the nuances, it works, is great. It is costly on your hardware, but that's because it's simulating. I'm going to turn this most of the simulation off and bake it down at the end. Because of that, it means I really need to be happy with the way I've designed everything around the streams and rivers. That's why I've gone to this level of detail, and we'll go to a little bit more as well. Because once I bake this water, I have to either delete the mesh and rerun the simulation if I want to move an object and have the water interact with it, or put objects over meshes and have no interaction. And again, I have a little water absorber here, these two lines absorbing it underneath this rock. So the idea here is it kind of disappearing into a sinkhole. It'll come out the other side here, flow down this little stream, fill up here. This will be another simulation area, a new one. Continue to flow down here, continue to flow down, and reach this river over here. And so on. And we can see here's some water, all these little blue bits of water. I'm going to have a lot of these. But now I've kind of figured out the process. It will absolutely speed up not only the water design, where I could use planes like I have over here, but they just don't look as good, but it'll speed up the world design as well, because it makes me pay attention to how I'm painting or placing landscape around the river, and rivers are the primary driver of the landscapes. They are what define mountains and wear down valleys and so on. So I begin from the bottom up design, and the first thing are the rivers. So over here I have, these are planar waters, so this is just one single 2D mesh plane with a water-based material. It looks great, but it's going to be replaced. Nothing going on underneath, no shader. I could put a shader underneath and keep these because they're nice and flat, but I may as well have it all simulated and have a few little trickles of streams running around this place, and have that happen for every single stream and every single large river. Bit of work, but I think the results are absolutely worth it. Solves a few problems. Another problem I was having with the spline-based rivers was going to be the underwater shader and how to design that, because they were going downhill so much. It would have had to have been a cast, basically, camera casting a couple millimeters above it. Am I underwater or not, or something like that? But I don't need to worry about that anymore because Fluid Flux handles that for me. And buoyancy should be fun too. It should mean I could probably have some boats to allow navigating of this fjord. So that's where we're up to. I've designed, the landscape material, figured all that out. It was a bit of effort. Begun painting the world. I'm starting again just in this quadrant as my start area, and I plan to finish this area before I really populate the rest, just so I have a real working copy, and I could probably even release this area as a demo. Have some fake terrain back here and then work on these and release it month by month, or kind of an early access style is a possibility. That way, bites off chewable chunks. As you can see, I've already populated a lot of this with these rocks, and again, the large rocks guide a lot of the terrain placements, and they will guide the procedural terrain placements. A lot of the heavy lifting is going to be done by the forest. Down here we can see I've got grass here. That's just a paint layer with grass foliage, and a lot of the lower areas, I think this should all be grass, and probably all down here will be grassy fields as well. So it looks like a lot, but once I get onto proper painting, it'll really speed up. But before that, I have to start at the very basics, and that is the waterways. So I have this entire simulation area complete. I have part of this simulation area done, being this lake, but I need to fill in this area here. The two simulations joined by this little hidden join underneath these rocks. And so on and so forth. That's same here. I'll have a hidden join underneath this little rock. Feed this river. There won't be too much in this quadrant, in this simulation. I think I'll just have this stream here, these two lakes. It'll flow down here. There'll probably end up being another lake here. Again, the simulation will dictate that, although I can of course dig holes and guide the water, have the water flow down, some waterfalls, hit the ocean, the fjord here in this area, and then there's going to be a big part here. Anything coming down from the mountains is going to be a bit of work. That's where I'm at. I'm still doing landscape design, but as we saw in some earlier videos, I did some very basic gameplay concepting just to make sure that I can do it and nothing is going to be beyond my capabilities, or beyond something I can reach. Some things are beyond my current capabilities, but as long as I'm going to be capable of learning and achieving the results that I want. I am enjoying the landscape design now with this fluid flux. It's really coming together. Anyway, that's it for Jarl's Favour devlog number something, and I'll catch you on the next one. Probably going to be another month away at this point. I might have some travel coming up. Okay, see ya.